Hello, my name is Amy Hampton, and welcome to my third screencast for the third learning module that I have chosen. This learning module I chose to complete was the game-based learning uh, module. And in this lesson, I chose to use the application of Nearpod. Nearpod is a website that allows you to create many different types of lessons to share information with students in many different ways in order to engage them more in the learning. A couple of teachers at my school have used Nearpod, so I was interested to see what this was all about, see how I could fit it into my lesson planning. I teach in a middle school social studies class, 7th grade. And for our curriculum, we use the Delaware Recommended Curriculum. These are units that have been created and are recommended by the state of Delaware to meet the standards for our students. So the lesson that I chose would be fitting into the civics unit entitled Expansion of Freedom. And within the unit, students work to look at the role of the majority and the minority in the United States and how that role has changed and how the rights of minorities and individuals have been protected through the passing of certain legislation. What I did like about Nearpod, it allows you to present your lesson in two different ways. So we have a live lesson, which is what I would use in a typical classroom on a typical day. It allows it generates a code, and the students would go to the Nearpod website and input the code to access the lesson. And it also gives the teacher some real-time data when they are collaborating or they're working in the different types of activities that can be embedded throughout. The student-paced right here lesson, it also generates a different code, and that can be given to students who are not able to be in the classroom at that time. If they're going away, on vacation that happens, or they're sick or something like that, or if we happen to have a snow day. These lessons can be embedded into like Google Classroom in order to students can use them at home or on the go. So here's my preview. So I would start the class with this question. This is why do you vote? And my students, I teach mainly inclusion. I teach 5 out of 6 of my classes are inclusion. So I have regular education and some special education students in each class. So working with a partner here, I have shoulder partner to answer the question. It really helps to kind of get the juices flowing and to start engaging students with something as simple as why we vote. In 7th grade, some students don't realize why we vote. So it's also an important conversation starter. So they would then type their thoughts in here. There's even a way to show some images, and it can all, and they post it. And then after that, we would discuss. So then it goes through, and this would be our first set of information. At the start of the class, I would give them a note-taking sheet, where they can maybe fill in the blank, which works very well with my inclusion classes. And this is just a way for, as I'm presenting new information to them, they can record it for themselves to have. We are not fortunate enough to be a one-to-one school. In fact, it's sometimes difficult to get the technology needed for lessons like this. So it would be useful for students to have the information so they can reflect and review when it comes time for assessments or entrance tickets, exit tickets, those things. So through this component, I'm just kind of going through early times in American history. who was included, landowners, and then this left out, women, Native Americans, and African Americans, or the slaves at the time. And then it goes through the creation of the Constitution. So then after they get some information, some of that background information, I asked them to collaborate with one another and said who was left out of voting when the state legislatures removed the land owning requirement. So then individually they would type their answer in and post it. So then we move through the African American experience with, we kind of fast forward time, as I would say in my class, talking about during the Civil War and the ending of slavery, what that meant for former slaves with the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendment, and then how some of those southern states tried to buck the system, and they passed new laws that would restrict these new rights of citizens. And then I have included a video that I've shown in the past. This is Mrs. Guilford. She talks about her time as a young lady during the time where poll taxes and literacy tests were there, and how it was so important for her to vote and how it's still important today. I find that showing videos with my students, especially with top concepts that are kind of hard to understand, really personalizes this for them so they can really understand. To them, they've never really seen restrictions like poll taxes and literacy tests, so it's hard for them to understand why their rights would be limited in the first place. So then I have a little bit of reflection. How would you feel if you had to pay a tax in order to vote? This aspect of the lesson I really like because it kind of forces every student to participate. When it is a whole class discussion, typically I have some pretty strong minds that will dominate the conversation. So there might be times when I don't get to everybody, and this is important. It's a way of informally assessing them very quickly, see if people are still getting it, if I need to go back, if we need to continue the conversation before moving on. So then I have another video about like a literacy test for someone who experienced this during the summer of 1964. And again, videos are excellent tools to use in the social studies classroom. And then I just added a quick online poll. It's a component of Nearpod, little quiz poll they have that, do you think you could pass a literacy test, yes or no? And then they would share that with me. Something quick to kind of reflect and move on. So then we talk about the women's suffrage movement, very, very briefly, sort of like a survey, give them some background information. I found this video from history.com that is really nice. It's nice and quick. All these videos are pretty quick to keep their interest. It gives a nice overview, shows them the parades, how people dressed, some of the reactions that women had. And then again, so in your opinion, why do you think African American men gained the right to vote decades before women did? So it asks them to reflect, use some information from some of the videos in order to make some of those deeper connections. So here is a map of women's suffrage, 1919. So full suffrage, meaning suffrage is being able to vote, and then how it kind of happened in the United States. Who could vote, where could they vote, where couldn't they? And then I'm going to ask students to use that to really answer this question. So they're using some textual based evidence from a primary source to answer this question. So why do you think so many Western states permitted women to vote before the passage of the 19th Amendment? And this would be a collaborative piece where some of the other ones would just go to me. We would talk about it after it went to me, but this is the collaboration where they can see other people's views and opinions and build upon it. I liken it to the discussion boards that we do at the college level, and it could be, very rich with discussions and making those connections. So then we move on to the Native American vote. Students don't really realize that Native Americans were considered a minority and how mistreated they were in American history. So this is kind of eye-opening to them. So this is sort of another collaboration. How have voting rights of the minority been limited in the past? You can kind of take a poll, see where people are at, and then talk about a little bit about the civil rights movement. Talk about the passage of the 24th Amendment. It helped to reinforce the 15th Amendment. And then I really liked this component. It's called Draw It. It's a component of Nearpod, and I'm going to ask them to create a timeline, and they could do that through using a pencil or marker. They can type, they can add pictures. So they would spend a little bit more time on this, but it also helps them to be creative, helps them to put things sort of in place, and then they can use whatever pictures they want or text or and it can be differentiated to meet the needs of my special education students, that they might need a little bit more guidance, a little bit more support than some of my higher level students that might be in those honors type of classes, because I have both of those in the same class. And then to finish the lesson off, we have again another discussion board type, the collaborative. Voting laws were passed in the 1960s to ensure all citizens had the right to vote. Do you think that all citizens have equal access to voting in today's society? Explain your opinion. So they only have 250 characters, which is good because some students will get too wordy and will talk around the subject and not really get to the meat of it. But it's a nice kind of exit ticket way to check their understanding of the lesson. See if the next day or the next time I see them, I need to go back if we need to revisit anything. I really liked how this lesson came about with Nearpod. I hope to use it a little bit more in the future. Just getting the technology in the classroom and engaging them in a different way. They're still getting some of that same information, but it's all right there. It's not just me doing a lot of it. It's a lot more of they're collaborating. Everybody is adding something to the discussion, which is what I really liked about it. So hopefully this lesson gets you excited about using Nearpod in the future in your classroom.